Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners and a few surprise guests. Today, we are actually at the first day of the Writers of the Future Awards Week here in Hollywood at the Roosevelt Hotel. And I'm interviewing right now Wulf Moon and Brittany Rainsdon. Wulf Moon, some of you remember from Writers of the Future Volume 35, who won with his story Super Duper Moon Girl and the Amazing Moon Dawdler. He's a fantasy and SF writer, voice actor, editor, and artist. Brittany Rainsdon, was published originally in Deep Magic, and she is a finalist in Volume 37 with her story Half Breed. And then she immediately turned around and became a winner for Volume 38 with her story The Last Dying Season.
So I could see that with Brittany, she was writing these big stories, and I had this.
Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners and a few surprise guests. Today, we are actually at the first day of the Writers of the Future Awards Week here in Hollywood at the Roosevelt Hotel. And I'm interviewing right now Wulf Moon and Brittany Rainsdon. Wulf Moon, some of you remember from Writers of the Future Volume 35, who won with his story Super Duper Moon Girl and the Amazing Moon Dawdler. He's a fantasy and SF writer, voice actor, editor, and artist. Brittany Rainsdon, was published originally in Deep Magic, and she's a finalist in Volume 37 with her story Half-Breed. And then she immediately turned around and became a winner for Volume 38 with her story The Last Dying Season. Today's podcast has a very special message, and I'm going to define a term for you, mentoring. Macmillan defines it as an experienced person who helps someone who has less experience, especially in their job. Webster's defines it as a trusted counselor or guide, a tutor or coach. Mentor actually came from the friend of Odysseus, also known as Ulysses, who was entrusted with the education of Odysseus' son Telemachus. He is the legendary Greek king of Ithaca and the hero of Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey. So welcome, Wulf Moon and Brittany Rainsdon.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, after that introduction, I believe this podcast is going to be epic.
Indeed, it will be. So on the subject now of mentoring, I have you specifically both together on this thing because Wulf as the mentor and Brittany as the mentoree. I'm going to discuss that whole process of what it entails and what's involved with that, but also the importance of it and how it's important also to find an appropriate, proper, and a mentor that will actually work with you and not discourage you. So I guess to begin with, Wulf Moon, I'm going to call you Moon for the rest of the...
Wonderful.
Okay,
That's my
good.
favorite title.
Okay, good. So you've been a mentor for a while. So what made you, or how did you evolve into becoming a mentor? And then what made you decide to choose Brittany?
So I actually was mentored myself, and that's what moves you to realize this helped me. How can I help others? Which is a big focus of this contest. But it really began with Dean Wesley Smith. Back in 1993, the Nebula Awards were held in Eugene, Oregon. And I was just at the point where I was starting up writing again after trials in our life. And my wife saw an ad for the Nebula Awards in town. She said, "Why don't you go?" And so I did. The very first person I met there was Dean Wesley Smith. And he asked me, he said, "I see you're from Eugene." And he was really surprised because he didn't know me. He says, "Have you written anything?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Well, I wrote the story that won the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards back in high school when I was 15, and it was published in Science World." And he said, "How many issues did that sell?" And I said, 500,000 per copy. And you were paid for that? I said, "Yes, I was paid above the pro rates even today for that." He goes, "You're a published writer." And then for the rest of the convention, he introduced me to Tim Powers, Gene Wolfe, all of these people that were like, "Oh my goodness, what am I doing here?" He was going up saying, "Have you met Wulf Moon? He's a published writer. Have you met Wulf Moon? He's a published writer." And by the end of that convention, because of what Dean did for me, I realized I had done something special. I didn't think this was a big thing, but Dean considered it a big thing. And that's what a mentor does, is he saw a fledgling writer that needed some encouragement and help to keep going. He introduced me to the Wordos writing group. There I met Jerry Oltian, who also was a friend and mentor. And that just continued to grow. Eventually, I sold a story to Dean. Dean and Chris Rush would have me out to their house on the coast. I got to meet K.W. Jeter at different meals that they would have, and they'd always invite me over. And
oh, by the way, just in case you didn't know, Dean and Chris was the very first, I guess, romance from Writers of the Future, from the very first workshop in Taos, New Mexico. That's where Dean met Chris and they started their relationship then, and they got married. So that was the very first Writers of the Future relationship.
Yes, that was a wonderful one.
Yeah.
And he was the first person to walk across the Writers of the Future
That's
stage
right.
as well.
That's
So-
right. In volume one.
So I
That's
knew
right.
a lot about Writers of the Future from Dean and Chris and the Wordless Workshop. So there's where that foundation of it all began. And then as time went on, I actually won the contest. And then I looked and said, well, how can I help other people win? And so at that time, there wasn't the Writers of the Future online workshop. It didn't exist yet.
Right.
And so I just looked and said, well, how can I help these others who with a little bit of guidance could probably win too? I knew there were good writers there. I'd been in the Writers of the Future forum. And so I set up a thread called Wulf Moon Super Secrets. And I said, anybody that wants to write a story every quarter can join. And it was just open call. And I did it for a month, and then I closed it, and I worked with those people. And so in that first year, I had a bunch of people join. The next year, I had even more join, like 17 people join. And that was the year you joined.
No, I was there the first year.
Oh, you're the first year. Okay,
First year.
let's
I was
get
there
this
the first
straight.
year. Yes, yeah.
And so you can go ahead and say how we met, which is very interesting.
Oh, so we met during volume 35.
Mhm.
Then one of the forum members had put up a challenge to submit every quarter, and I was still pretty new to the contest. I think I'd only submitted 3 entries before then. Maybe 4, but I was like, okay, well, I was able to do that all last year. Of course, I will try that again, and I will try to write a news story, because I had heard some of these guys, and I'm sure it was probably you, say, try to submit a news story every quarter. And so I decided to do that. Well, after the first quarter, I found out I was pregnant, and and I was like, well, that's okay. I can still do this. But what ended up happening is the last quarter, I couldn't really focus, because that's my due date. My baby ended up coming late on September 24th, which the deadline is the 30th, just a week before the deadline. And, but I hadn't been able to work on my story. I hadn't been able to focus on it, but I went on the forum, and I was like, guys, I really want to make this, and so they're like, it's okay, you're having a baby, but I really did still want to make it. So I ended up taking my laptop with me to the hospital, because I was like, well, if there is the off chance I have time. So I ended up writing most of that story in the hospital after delivering my baby. I don't know if it's the flood of endorphins or whatever, but I couldn't go to sleep, and I was like, okay, I am going to meet my goal. And so, and then I got home. I had written everything but the last scene. Hard, transitioning to home with a new baby and everything. My husband agreed one night to watch the kids so that I could finish. And so the last day of the contest, I was able to submit just barely. No time for critiques, no time for anything. But I had, talked with some of these on the forum, and Wulf knew about this, and so he ended up reaching out to me and was like, hey.
Yeah. So at that point, I talked to you and said, John, you got to get this story, because she wrote a finalist while just about delivering a baby in the hospital.
That's a blog on risethefuture.com. The blog there. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I asked Brittany, let me take a look, because she made finalists, but she didn't win. And I said, well, let me take a look at your finalists and let's see what's going on with it. So she sent it to me, and I looked it over, and I could see the thing that would have probably held it back, and that's because I won the contest. And by that time, I was actually acting as an editor at Future Science Fiction Digest, doing podcasts and reading stories for them. So I said, well, Brittany, I said, there's this one issue that you have. You're a great writer, and she's a very evocative writer, but the big thing she was doing was, she had this tendency of, she'd start out, if it was science fiction, you'd think you were reading a science fiction story. And then by the end, she would do a fantasy ending. If she promised a fantasy story in the beginning, by the end, it would turn out to be science fiction. And I said, you make a promise in the opening of your story to the reader, a genre promise, actually. And so to swap it out at the end is actually kind of a miscue, and it's not expected. So really pick one or the other. Don't do both. Pick one or the other, focus on that, and deliver on your promise by the end. So you can add to that, but that was the counsel. I worked with you on that story and several others, because it took her a while for her to understand the lesson. So
yeah, well, and there were a number of other things. The good thing about, I think, having a mentor is that dialogue that you can have a little bit. And, Wulf has read almost every piece I submitted to Writers of the Future. He has read at least the beginning or the whole story. And, through that process, I learned a lot.
So on one of these stories, because she was writing very big stories. They're all very big. And I had that issue too. That's why I wasn't winning the contest. I tried winning for 25 years before I finally won. But I got several messages from the judges to write, I was doing 17,000 word stories. I was a novelist trying to write short stories, and I had to rethink what a short story was. So I could see that with Brittany, she was writing these big stories. And I have this exercise I developed for myself to win a very tight flash fiction contest. It had 30,000 entries for the year. And I designed this exercise to teach myself to write tighter and more concise. And I did that exercise through that whole year, and I won out of 30,000 entries for the year. I won grand prize, and I had another story in that top 10. So I know this exercise works, and it's called Kill Your Darlings. And so that's what I titled it. And then I told Brittany, for 1 month, I would like you to do 5 of these Kill Your Darlings exercise, which is a lot. They're hard. They're reduction, but they're also trying to find the heart of your story, the beating heart. And then you build up after you found that. And so I told Brittany, do 5 of these in 1 month, and your writing will change. And she actually listened to me and did it. Not everybody listened.
I did.
And so what happened? One of those stories, go ahead.
So one of those stories was, because I've been a finalist 4 times in this contest, ended up, first of all, being a finalist again here, also didn't win. But I sent it over to Deep Magic.
And I got to say something there too.
Oh, say so. Yeah.
So she didn't send it anywhere first. She was only entering Writers of the Future. All right.
This is true.
So this was something I discovered that a lot of people in the forum are only sending to the contest. And that's good, but it's not the only market out there.
Right.
It's the #1 market, and you should be, there's no one else that will reward you more as a new writer than Writers of the Future. So you better have something in there every quarter. But then stories would come back and they wouldn't send them anywhere else because now they weren't anonymous. And so they felt threatened sending them out because now they might not like them if they rejected the story. And so I found this out through Brittany. And so I changed the whole workshop that everybody had to send out 1 story to Writers of the Future every quarter and another to another market. Let's just start with that. And you had to do that. So I told Brittany, from now on, you're sending a story out every quarter, which is it's a good start for beginners.
Right.
And so she listened again. And the very first one you sent out, number 1, it was made from a KYD, a Kill Your Darlings exercise. And number 2, what happened to that very first story?
They accepted it.
And where was that at?
It was at Deep Magic. And then
and the title of it?
Oh, the title of it is Perfectly Painted Lies. And that was printed in the spring issue this year. And it was actually reprinted along with one of Wulf's stories, a lot of wonderful stories, in their Best of anthology for Volume 2.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I have to tell you, Deep Magic, through that period that they chose the stories from, they published Terry Brooks, Ken Liu, who was also a winner of this contest, Michael Sullivan. We've got Jeff Wheeler, of course, Charlie Holmberg. These are all best-selling authors. And so out of that selection, Brittany, the first story she sent out, not only got published in Deep Magic, but she also got chosen out of all of these great writers to be in their best of Deep Magic anthology too. And it was nice because as her mentor, I was there too. So that's always nice when the mentor gets to also be there with you and you get to share the table of contents together. That's an important thing. So, but that's an amazing thing that she hadn't been sending any of them out, and she had gold sitting there.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing to encourage all of the podcast listeners that really don't sit on those stories. Send them out. So go ahead. Okay, you don't have to go ahead. We'll let John go ahead.
Okay, so now you've got a mentor, but you've also got writing groups. And so I've heard, you hear people say that you need to join writing groups. How is that different than actually finding and working with a mentor? Have you participated in writing groups?
Yes, I've been in a number of writing groups. I think for the mentorship that we've had, it's more of like directed, I mean, advice, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's personal advice. It's very different because like when I'm in a critique group or something, you have all these different levels of experience, I guess, you know, and
so all these different levels of experience, but then people also don't have a perspective of a coach or of a mentor. So they're giving their own perspective from their angle. This is what I would do, rather than this is what.
And sometimes it's conflicting or whatever. The thing about mentor, I think it's personalized direction. The other thing is when you have a mentor, a lot of times I think it works out best to have a mentor that happens organically, I guess. Like our friendship, our mentorship happened organically. If that makes sense, you know, because sometimes mentorships don't work out, you know, if you don't jive, if you don't click, you know.
So then you've participated in various writing groups, and then are you still in writing groups? Or no, now that you've got working with Wulf Moon, then you're just kind of like.
So I do, I have a lot of writing friends. I don't have a regular writing group right now because it's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have 4 kids. I have another one on the way. And I've cut back on doing that, out of necessity, I suppose, you know. And I do think there is still value in writing groups, critique groups. I'm part of, the Wolf Pack. Sometimes I get on the forum and we exchange stories and do things like that. But I think, with a mentor, you have a mentor is someone who you respect and admire. They have this body of work that, like, I loved Super Duper Moon Girl. Like my son loved Super Duper Moon Girl. I don't know how many times we read that story, you know. And I'd read Beast of the Month, some of these, and I knew, you know, Wulf had this track record of, you know, what he'd published, and I read his stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I think hearing from a mentor who's further ahead and believes in you, you know, and is pushing you, that's worth a lot, you know, and that's different than a critique group or something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a saying, if you want to reach a destination, the best person to ask is someone who has been there. And it's so simple. But finding that person that's been there that will take the time to help you is very hard, because once they've gotten there, it takes actually self-sacrifice to turn around and say, I'm going to come back and help you get up this mountain too. But that's what we should do, being a good person. We shouldn't just say, I'm just going to take this and run and see y'all later. And so that's what I did on the forum was, okay, I won this. I know a whole bunch of the people around me were trying to win it, and I knew how now. And I figured out a way that I could explain things to them so that they could win too. And out of that workshop, there's now been, well, there's 4 that would have been here at this actual event, but couldn't make it. We've got 2 here though. Leah Ning, who read my Super Secrets, and her second entry actually was the entry after she read my Super Secrets on the Writers of the Future forum, that she figured out how to compose her winner, and it was her winner after reading that. So, and others did the same. Others that weren't in my workshop but are in the forum reading it wrote to me and said, I made my first professional sale. You know, so it's had over 740,000 views now inside of your forum, because it marks every time someone goes in there. So that's huge. And that makes me really happy, because not only am I mentoring the group that signed up to do this, they volunteered to do it. And I keep each year upping the stakes. So it gives them more work to do, because it takes a lot of work to become a professional writer, and from an amateur, you can't dish it all up at once, because it'll freak them out what you actually have to do. But you build your muscles, your writing muscles up to that level. And so anyway, that's what we did with the Super Secrets. I will say others that I mentored in there. One was Zach Bright. He just won the Mike Resnick Memorial Award for New Writers. And he actually did that off the same exercise that I gave Brittany, the Kill Your Darlings exercise. He actually did that exercise that I taught him and used it to create his winner in the Mike Resnick Memorial Award.
That's great. That's great. It's one thing that's really nice about this too, is, you know, yourself as a winner 2 years ago and having been striving this for 25 years, and then yourself, the whole thing of paying it forward. I mean, that's something that L. Ron Hubbard started when he first created this contest in '83. But even before that, in the 30s and 40s, when he was one of the most popular writers of pulp fiction in America, I mean, C.L. Moore, there's letters of correspondence back and forth between him and her as he was mentoring her on how to write. And there's so many other writers or aspiring writers. He'd take the time, and you see these letters of correspondence where he'd send them, okay, to this, and this. And it really made a difference. And he, I mean, a lot of the essays that you read on the workshop, they were on the online writing workshop. And then again, now, are those the ones that he wrote there in the 30s and 40s, and they're as applicable now as they were when he started them. And that's why A.J. Budrus, Aldous Budrus, the first coordinating judge, I mean, he had great stories to tell when he, first saw L. Ron Hubbard at a convention. I think it was in Chicago. He said everybody was there just mingling around. Then all of a sudden, this hush took over the whole conference room. And he said, "He's here." And it was just, I mean, the way he told the story was great. When L. Ron Hubbard came in and spoke to him at the conference there. But that was his whole thing, was to help do that, to help pay it forward. And that's what this contest has now grown to such humongous proportions, with entries now from over 175 countries. And like I think you commented earlier, there's there's thousands of entries every quarter that comes in now because it's so big. And so when a person actually wins Writers of the Future, it's like you're in the upper 1 percentile of writers, and so the amount of respect that the contest has now, because of all the judges are the ones, I have no clue, it's just, I will be administrator, support, but the judges are the ones that picked you and said that you're worthy, and they picked you and said you're worthy. And so it's important that people really get the value of this and what mentoring is, and being able to pay it forward. And the people that will go back to help someone else is just really, you don't see it a whole lot, unfortunately, in general. You see it, definitely in the science fiction and fantasy community. I mean, witness all of our judges, that's what they're doing. But then our winners too, and we'll have several more winners here later this week from past years coming in wanting to give their support and help as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, the contest is actually, even though L. Ron Hubbard's gone, it's still mentoring a whole new generation of writers. And Patrick Rothfuss, David Farland, even my mentor, Dean Wesley Smith, was the very first guy to walk across the stage.
Mm-hmm.
So it's creating this wonderful whole new crop, a whole new generation of writers that have really influenced the industry. And and then some of them have turned around and helped other writers. So it really feeds a very good spirit in the industry. Dean, one of the things when I would share my writing with him, and he actually published my next professional story in Star Trek Strange New Worlds 2, Seventh Heaven, that was called A Borg Love Story. What could be sweeter? And it worked. I did it. But I always challenge myself when I'm writing, and I always challenge my students to think outside the box, because that's the story that's going to sell. But Dean worked with me on what was third person close or third person intimate point of view, because new writers tend to do omniscient, and it's distant. And so he talked about, get right into that person's head and don't leave it. And so that was his advice to me. And I've always worked on that. And now I work with the people I'm mentoring on that very thing. How can you, instead of being distant and have this distant camera view, why not just stick it right on their forehead, and everything you see and experiences through that character? And it becomes much more visceral, because you start walking in their body. You actually kind of inhabit them with that third person close or third person intimate point of view. And so I really work on people with that. I worked on that with you too.
Absolutely, yes.
And it makes for stronger writing. Not that you aren't already a strong writer, but that's what a mentor does. They look and say, here's how we could do it even. You're already good. How can we make it better? So anyway, if you wanted to add to that.
Well, so you were talking a little bit about, how your mentor, some of the things you learned from him. I think one of the biggest things I've learned from Wulf is to believe. When he came home from Writers of the Future, I don't know, about 2 years ago, sometime after that, he told me to write on a sticky note that belief becomes reality, and put that in where my writing space is, which I share with, children, and it wanders off at some point. I think sometimes it's really hard to believe, that I mean, there's thousands of people who enter this contest. The odds, if it was drawing it out of a hat, are, so small, if that's how it really worked. And sometimes it can just like seem like so much, but I think for me, knowing that there's someone who I respected as a person, as a writer, who believed that I was capable of doing this, I could stick that note back up and like, yeah, okay, because when it comes down to it, then belief becomes your action, and then your action can become your results. Eventually, hopefully, but yeah, and I think for me that that has been the biggest thing. I mean, we can talk about, evocative details and plotting and the Kill Your Darlings and all that, and those have been wonderful, wonderful things. But I wasn't sending stories out. I wasn't. There was a lot that I wasn't doing, because sometimes that just, you're insecure when you're a new writer. Sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
For sure.
And yeah. Anyway. So thank you for that.
You're
so
most welcome.
much.
What's funny about that saying, you're not the only person I've told that to, but it's really important. You really, and that's what's nice with the certificates from this contest, is it starts you on that path to believing. And then once you get here, you'll need more belief. And so this contest really helps you to believe in the power of what you're capable of doing. But when you're new, you're very scared because you keep getting rejections. And it's because you haven't reached a level of professionalism yet where that story will meet the standards that a professional magazine needs to be able to publish it. So that's the issue with new writers, and a mentor can help you keep scaling up so you level up. But that saying, so people that read the secrets on the forum, they'll write to me, and there was a teenager in high school that wrote to me and said, "Hey, I really like those, and I'd like to be a writer one day too, and I liked your super duper moon growth story." I said, "Okay, put this on your writing monitor. Belief becomes reality, or belief determines reality." I said, "And keep believing that you will be a writer." Well, in time, he used me for an essay and some things like that, and then we kind of faded away. And the other day, my Facebook post popped up with him on it when we were first talking, and he wrote to me right away, and he said, "I saw that saying." He said, "I've kept that on my monitor all this time." He said, "I want you to know, in just 2 years, I've become a professional writer. I sold a story to Daily Science Fiction, and I think another one to one of the Escape Pod programs." And he said, that saying, he said, "I would have never thought I would be here today." But he said it was because of that saying, that same one that you say, that he believed that he could do it. He said, because of some personal attention. And really, that's what mentors do. They help you see your potential. They help you figure it out. And they also know kindly what you need to change in order to get there. And so if they're nice about it, they won't tear you down. They'll actually build you up and show you a pathway so that you can get up to that next level.
Good. Now, you made mention earlier, Brittany, about the organic discovery of a mentor. So we got people listening to this from all over the world. How does one trip over an organic mentor?
Well, I feel very fortunate of how that worked out, that Wulf kind of took notice of me. But I think engaging in like the Writers of the Future Forum, if I hadn't engaged with people, we would have never met. You need to be available, present, I guess. And I think opportunities present themselves if you are present, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, they're saying when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, but the teacher will only know that you're there if you're actually there, visible. Yeah. So the Writers of the Future Forum, like for me to get Dean as my mentor, I actually had to make the step to go to the Nebula Awards and meet people who are very high-end writers. These are all people that won Nebulas, Hugos, Stokers. They were all there. Tim Powers was there, my hero,
Yeah.
And here he was. And so you have to be able to, I guess, extend yourself, even though it's scary. Go to Superstars. I encouraged a whole bunch of people in the forum to go to Superstars. About 4 went. Leah Ning was one. Some others went as well. One of them won Writers of the Future and will be here next year. So you have to actually be kind of looking,
Right.
and then yes, if you're trying and somebody sees that, they might say, I'm going to help you get to that next spot. So good people do that. They turn around and help that person, give them a leg up. So that's the whole spirit behind this contest. That's what all the judges are doing with the winners. But before you become a winner, there's also other people that are turning around trying to help you there too. And one thing about writing groups, so a lot of writing groups are people all at the same level. And so they can help you because they're all learning together. So that's one way to level up, is just as a group to keep studying, working hard. And the more you write, the better you're going to get. And you'll actually be able to help one another. But a lot of times it's all the same people with similar issues that can't see them to help you figure out how to level up. So you really want to try to find those people that are ahead of you that you can learn from. So that's why I say go to conferences, go to Superstars if you can, get a scholarship if you can afford it. That's what I did, and that's how I got there. And if none of that's available, one of my mentors was Ray Bradbury. I've never met him, but I read him all the time and I study how he writes. And that to me is from a kid where I learned how to write evocative writing, because nobody was better at poetic prose than Ray Bradbury. So even if you can't afford it or find it, there are other ways that you can study these great writers that you really appreciate, and they'll help you advance.
That's good. Now, is there such a thing, like, can you Google writing mentors and have even a modicum of success? Or is that just kind of like you just hit and miss on that way versus going and searching them out and just becoming part of whatever they're participating in?
So the reason I say or organically or whatever sometimes works out is because, I don't know, then you kind of click sometimes. I've had some friends who have maybe like won PitMat or different things, and they won a mentorship, but it didn't really mesh. Sometimes when it doesn't organically happen, then it's harder to it just doesn't mesh. I don't know how else to say that, but like.
Well, here's the other way that you can do it.
Yeah.
And that is to take writing courses by different writers and figure out, do they write the way you like? Do you like what they're teaching? And many writers will also do, some of them will do editing. And so like for my editing clients, so some actually pay me to edit their manuscripts, and I become the writing coach then. So that's another way that you can get it. If you can afford it, you can actually hire somebody, and if they're good, they won't just take your money and scratch on the page. They'll actually help you make a better story that you can keep learning from. And then like for my clients, I actually help them find markets to send their stories to. So like in the case of Zach Bright, he was just in the Super Secrets workshop, but I helped them find that market, the Mike Resnick Award. And then I kept on the group, so to make sure that they were going to enter something in it. I asked who qualifies in this group, because you have to be a new writer with nothing published. And then as a good mentor, I said, hey, have you got a story in? Are you getting one in? Let's do this, So I had a client, actually Elizabeth Chatsworth, who had me edit the opening of her novel, which went on to be a #1 steampunk bestseller. And after I read what she had written, I said, are you entering Writers of the Future? She said, no. I said, why on earth are you not entering? All this can do is help your debut novel by winning Writers of the Future. And she said, okay, I'll think about it. She's a very, very nice British woman. And I'll think about it. And then I followed up with her as the quarter was ending. And I said, so Elizabeth, how's your entry coming into Writers of the Future? I haven't done it. I said, Elizabeth, this is crazy. You are a great writer. Write a story. I said, take a chapter out of your novel if you have to and make a short story out of it and send it in. Well, so because I did that and stayed on her, she did. Well, she won Writers of the Future. So
it's a great story. I read both her short story as well as a novel, both.
Excellent.
And it came out. It was great. It was the same thing that Patrick Rothfuss did. He had someone tell him to submit to Writers of the Future because he'd been shopping around his novel for quite some time to no avail. And someone said, "Have you heard of Writers of the Future?" He hadn't, so I said, "Be sure to enter, the contest." So he took one of the chapters, the Road to Levanshire, and turned that into a short story, like I said, the Road to Levanshire, and he won the contest with that, just like what Elizabeth did. I mean, I think had she sold her novel by the time she won?
She had sold it, but she hadn't published it yet, and the publisher was working with her still on it to get it up to the level that she wanted it to be. So, and David Farland, who's the contest judge, actually sent her to me to help her with that opening that they really wanted to nail down. So I did. But then when I saw her writing, I was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Why aren't you submitting? You can, and you still have a chance, before your novel gets published. And she listened finally, but it took following up because people have insecurities, and you just have to kind of keep helping them past that. So that's that belief determines reality thing. You got to believe. And if you don't believe in yourself, a good mentor is going to help you believe just by saying, you're a good writer.
Yeah.
Send your story out.
And that's also the value just of Writers of the Future with the honorable mentions. That was, Brandon Sanderson, he said he'd submitted several novels and he was just building up a little bit of, insecurity was going more and more and more as he wasn't selling. And then he got his honorable mention. It gave him that little vote of confidence to keep on going. We had another, Daliso Chapanda. He's, you would never heard of him other than the fact that he was runner-up in Britain's Got Talent as a comedian. And he's from Malawi. And nobody said, I was the only science fiction writer out there and I was the only stand-up comedian. But when he got it, he said he posted his honorable mention certificate on his wall for years. It gave him what he needed to know that he could write and don't give up. And he did. And like I said, now he's got his own tour throughout the UK as a comedian. He's doing incredibly well. But all of his press releases still he was an honorable mention in Writers of the Future. And Kevin Anderson never won, but he was honorable mention multiple times. And then he pro'd out. Joe Black was honorable mention in Writers of the Future at the beginning of his career. It's amazing when I talk to people, say, "Oh yeah, I'm familiar with the contest. Yeah, I was honorable mention." It's like, cool, So it is important to be able to get, if nothing else from the contest, if you get up to the point of getting an honorable mention, you are in that upper crust of writers who, if you persist, you can actually get, like you're saying, you just, believe in yourself and keep on going, that you do have the basic resources there to make it as a writer. There's a lot of honorable mention certificates that are issued every quarter now, but it's not because we're just trying to pump out more honorable mentions, because the stories are that much better, in part due to the online writing workshop that we started a year and a half ago. It raised Dave Farland says it's just raised the quality of storytelling considerably. But also because the number of entrants to the contest is so much more now, from all over the world. So people are putting the honorable mention in their resumes and automatically will get taken out of the slush pile and read by editors, because they know that when a person's at the point, they're already talking to somebody who's in the upper 20% of aspiring writers.
Yeah, one other thing, when you said, how do you find a mentor or a writing group that can help you? The Writers of the Future Forum has people that are about to win in it. And every year we have a couple of winners from it, every single year. So, and if they didn't win, like one quarter, we had 3 finalists. So, so they're there sitting there and they're all swapping manuscripts. So they're already right at that professional level, and it's free to join. So you can get free mentoring. Yes. And that's what happened for you. I noticed you because you joined Writers of the Future, Brittany. So.
And no, exactly. Well, and I think the forum, it's just a nice place, because I think this contest and the forum where people come to, it attracts good people who are helping each other. Because that's what the whole contest is about, is paying it forward, is seeing the good that and the possibilities in new writers. Right. And so anyway, it's just a good place. I would really encourage people to participate in the forum and be there, because I know for me, it made a huge difference, So
yeah, and for people who don't know, on writersofthefuture.com, which is where we're all talking about right now, it's you've got the forum. There's the free online writing workshop. There's the podcast, which we're almost up to 150 episodes now, publish one new one every week, which has all types of topics on the subject of getting published as an author as well as an illustrator. And we have just giants in the field talking about it. We have the blog, which has posts actually from both of you on it, which are really great. It's just personal stories. Because one thing that's also important to have is that awareness that this person was just like you, except they're like 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, or even just 6 months earlier. They're like you are right now. You want to make it. You're trying. You don't know if you got what it takes because all you get is rejects. Kevin Anderson jokes about he had like over 700 rejections, as an author, but he's right now one of the highest paid authors in America. He just kept on working it. And that's the one thing that you get from the contest. It's all about that. And that was the purpose that was set up by Mr. Hubbard originally when he created this contest, was to provide that means for the aspiring writer have their works seen and acknowledged. Nobody acknowledges you out there. Nobody says, hey, that's great. Keep on going. The worst that's going to happen when you submit your story, your art, the very worst that will happen is that you get an email from the contest director saying, thank you very much for submitting. Submit again. That's the worst criticism you're going to get. So you keep on doing it, and eventually you get to a point where a judge will actually give you something, but you'll start getting your honorable mentions, silver honorable mentions, finalist. And that's what the whole thing, that's why it was created that way. We've been true to that. And the contest isn't political. It's not religious. It's just about science fiction and fantasy and really honoring those genres and making it possible for anybody that wants to make their go at it going.
And then if you win the contest, you actually get mentored by David Farland, Tim Powers. In my class, we had Orson Scott Card as our instructors. They spend a week with you, helping you become better writers. And you've got the best in the industry actually mentoring this new crop of writers so that they get help to get up to that next level. I consider David Farland my mentor, and just because I always got the daily writing tips, because Joni Levacki says sign up for the daily writing tips. Well, so you get those every day and you read them.